Hey everybody, and welcome to another installment of Board Games Hitting My Table. So in this series I take a look at all the non-new to me board games that I've played over the last couple of weeks, just to give you an idea about what keeps hitting my table, of course. Before I get started on the video, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK, and if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get started on the games. I'm going to start with a 3-player game of Brussels 1893. Now, Brussels 1893 was actually my favourite game of September this year, and I had some very tough competition that month. And winning that month was a true feat of strength, I suppose. So Brussels 1893. I think when I originally ranked it, it was like in the 40s, maybe 50s. This has shot up like another 20 places or so. I think this game is close to flawless. I can't think of anything I dislike about it at all. In its essence, it's basically a worker placement style game. However, not only are you placing your workers, you are assigning money with those workers to try and gain majority in kind of influence in these columns to get these bonuses at the bottom as well. And these are all brilliant. Like, they can give you workers back that are potentially locked up in the prison here. You can climb tracks, which will give you points based on different strategies. I'm going to record a review very soon, so hopefully that'll be up in the very near future. But this was another fantastic game. Everybody who played it enjoyed it immensely, and we all went for a very different strategy. Like, I went to basically get as many buildings down as I could and completely top out my building influence to get as many points as I can. One of my opponents really specialised in creating these shields here, because whenever you have a completely surrounded shield on the worker placement part here, then you get a number of points based on how many shields you have, as long as you have the majority of your workers surrounding that shield. So there's so many interlocking mechanisms here, and everything synergizes so beautifully. You can even build up this little workforce of like helpers and stuff. I mean, this game is sublime. I think it is brilliant. It's going to do very well for a debut this year, and when it comes to my top 100 next month. So yeah, this one, I know it's getting reprinted soon, so keep an eye out for it. If you love your mechanical Euros that just work like clockwork, then Brussels 1893 is amazing. I've also played a 2-player game, because this is only a 2-player game, of Catching. So this was a game that Mackenzie Franklin from Side Game LLC recommended to me. This is a true hidden gem, one that's faded into obscurity, and it's such a good game. This is very simple, and it has a brilliant drafting system, which is much like the system from Seven Wonders Duel, where, when you're drafting something, you are uncovering something for your opponent. And in this one, you simply have a bunch of different numbered cards, and you're trying to pick up high numbers of the same colour, because one action you can do is to sell those cards by multiplying them together. So you're forced to take one of those two actions, which means that inevitably you're going to start revealing really good cards to your opponent when you really don't want to. Again, if you can find a copy out there in the wild of this one, you can probably get it for dirt cheap, and it's definitely worth a punt, because it really works so well. Very smooth, very elegant, and it's just good fun. So that is Kaching. More 2-player games now, with a 2-player game of Stella. So I introduced this one to someone who hadn't played it before, and I've gone through a bit of a dry spell playing Stella, actually, because whenever I think about Stella, I always think about its sister game, the multiplayer version, I suppose, called Subastral. Now, Subastral is more of a simple set collection style game with some cool twists on it, but Stella is a bit more cerebral. There's a bit more gaminess to it, and that for me, it was kind of it's prevented it getting to the table so often. And bear in mind the fact that this is strictly 2 players, but since I've had these two, they kind of keep being in flux. One I like more than the other one. It's pretty much whichever one I play more recently is the one I prefer. So I think I actually rate them right next to each other in the rankings. This is such an amazing 2-player game. Another one that has not really taken off. I don't know anybody who talks about this game, and they should, because it is such a brilliant little tableau builder. As you're collecting cards, placing them in this telescope of yours that looks like this, which is a spatial puzzle, but you're also trying to build runs of cards, because that is going to be your multiplier when it comes to scoring the ones in your telescope. And it's got this very cool drafting mechanism that I've never seen before. Check out my review, and yeah, this one still is going for strong. Again, I did have that dry spell with it. Didn't really have the massive urge to play it again, but since kind of breaking through that and getting it to the table, it reminded me why I loved it so much. And we had a very good game in this one. I think there was very few points in it. I think I just managed to win it on one of the suits. I got a massive multiplier on by building up my notebook, they call it, which is your multiplier up like 5 or 6 steps, which means you get, I got like 50 odd points from one single suit, whereas my opponent really went for those majorities and beat me on most of those. But I think I just edged the win on Stella. But I love the game. It's fantastic. And speaking of amazing games, I've had a very good month this month, or this half month, and we played a 3-player game of Biblios. So Biblios, another game I haven't got to the table in probably over a year. And, I've always said this is one of the best. This is one of the Mount Rushmore of great filler games. And I still feel that way. No matter how many filler games I play, Biblios always comes back and holds its own. So yeah, I've been very steady in my rankings for over the years. And for a filler game, that's not an easy thing to do. You have to be something special because, inevitably heavier games, more involved games are going to hold their own more because there's more going on. But Biblios is a brilliant kind of 2-phase game where the first half you have this kind of push your luck distribution mechanism where you're drawing cards from this deck. You can either keep one for yourself, give them to your opponents, or put them in a bidding pile. And in the second phase, some of the cards you can collect are money cards, which you can pay to acquire the cards that are put in that bidding pile. And the idea is that you want to be trying to create or have the majorities in these different sets. And they all correspond to a different die value, which are, of course, ranging from 1 to 6, but that is manipulatable throughout the game. So sometimes the suits you're collecting might be tanked by other players. You can raise things up, even though you haven't got the majority in them. And it's all this kind of smoke and mirrors going on behind the scenes because you do not know what your opponents are giving up, what they're going for. And I just love the way that worked. We had such a dynamic game. It came down to the wire. I think the winner won on 5 points on a tiebreaker. Yes, it was very, very close. I ended up actually having a really good position in one of these suits, but I ended up giving them away because I didn't think I did in order to acquire more money cards, and that came back to to bite me. But yeah, this game is sublime. If you can get a copy of it, do it. This is if I could have an essential line, Biblios would be in it. And speaking of that, we played a 3-player game of Ohanami, another game that nobody talks about. And I do not know why, because this has all the hallmarks to be, a massive, massive success. It is brilliant. This is another drafting game. This is more of a closed drafting game, though, as you do that classic pass and draft thing. And you're trying to collect these cards, which come in 4 different types, all of which score in different ways, or 3 of them score in the same ways, but they amplify in points, but only score in certain rounds. And you've also got these cards that you can collect based on a sliding scale. But the restriction in this game is that when you collect them, each single card has a unique number on it, like this. And you can basically build 3 columns of cards. However, you can only place these cards, the ones you collect in the future, higher than your highest card or lower than your lowest card. And I think that mechanism just completely changes the dynamic of this game. The game becomes more restrictive as it goes on. You can end up creating bigger and bigger gaps, which you didn't necessarily want to make it more difficult for you to draft the cards you want. And yeah, I love this game. It is so, so good. And another game that, if I could, I would put it in an Essentials line with my name on it because I endorse it that strongly. So that is Ohanami. Another brilliant game. We also played a 3-player game of Flea Market. So this is a game that really doesn't have any reverence, rated very poorly on Board Game Geek, and I'm not quite sure why, because I find it very charming and a lot of fun. So this is a bidding style game. However, you have limited control over what you can bid because your bids are based on dice rolls. So essentially what's going to happen is you're going to roll these neutral dice, which is going to determine the item that comes up for sale. And then everybody is going to roll their coloured dice. You've got a pair of them. And depending on who's rolled the highest is going to have first refusal to pay that many coins to acquire that item. So if I say rolled an 8, my opponent rolled a 4, I'd have to spend 8 to get that item, but I'd go first. If I pass on it, it would go to my opponent, who would only have to pay 4, and so on. And then what you're going to do is, as you acquire these items, they potentially could get rolled again and go back up for auction. You get a bit of a commission for that. And also, if another player buys it off you, then you also get that money. And then it comes down to a race to get to a certain amount of coins. And that's it, really. So it's all about how much you are going to spend for the items that are probably not going to get rolled too often as compared to the items that are probably going to get rolled a lot, but of course are going to be more expensive, or people are going to be willing to pay more for them. So I always like this game because I seem to have this weird luck with it where I just take a punt on a wild item. Like I think I bought the the 14 or something, which isn't going to be rolled that often, and it kept on getting rolled, and I kept on getting big payouts for it, which gave me the edge. So yeah, you do have to roll with the punches in this one. It's very lucky, but it works for the game. The luck factor actually is a benefit and makes the game more fun. So yeah, and it only takes around 15 to 20 minutes to play, and again, if you can find a copy out there in the wild, it's worth a punt because it is very good. So that is Flea Market. Another 2-player game now. Now this is going back to my classics. This is Patchwork by Uwe Rosenberg. So Patchwork has almost reached this level of being a Hall of Fame game, I suppose, in my collection. I've played this so many times, probably close to my most played game ever. And I got this one back to the table after probably around 2 years of not playing it. This is the classic kind of Tetris polyomino style game as you're trying to fill up your sheet. Because every exposed space is going to be a negative point at the end of the game. But I love the time track system in this game, where every tile you acquire not only costs you buttons, which is your currency, but will also cost time. And the more time you spend, the more you're going to go around this track, which means it's going to be longer before you get another turn. And I love the balance of that. This game was quite a strange one because we did the setup and the first few turns were all the very high valued tiles, which meant that we had to keep passing to get more money to buy them. And before we knew it, half the time track was wasted before we even placed anything on the board. But I actually managed to recover quite well, and I only had 2 exposed squares at the end, which was a big surprise to me because both me and my opponent thought we were going to do terribly. We thought we were going to be in negative points, but it ended up being a really close fight, and we both did remarkably well considering. But yeah, this is a classic 2-player game. One of my favourite Rosenbergs, despite being feather light really, but it is clever, and yeah, I still recommend it. So that is Patchwork. Nice to get that one back to the table after such a long time. Also played a 2-player game of Everdale. Now, I haven't played Everdale since it first got released, many years ago. Obviously, it's blown up to huge success since then. I think we played just the base game. I don't think there was any expansion content in there. But I thought it was quite nice. A 2-player game only took around 45 minutes to an hour, which was quite breezy. I got absolutely destroyed because I just didn't seem to find any synergies or really know what I was doing. But I thought it was fine. I do like that idea of when I'm placing workers on the board, when I remove them, it might be a time where you can sneak in there. So it's not like a standard worker placement by going back and forth. Your pacing is kind of different to your opponent's, which can change things. And you can kind of camp on spots to prevent people going to the spots that that they want. That's probably my favourite aspect to it. You've got some cool little tableau building as well. Very charming to look at, gorgeous artwork. I cannot deny that. I think maybe it's a little bit gateway for me, but I probably would still play it because it is relatively quick. So that is Everdale. We also played a 2-player game of the Red Cathedral. So I actually used to have this one in my collection, but I actually ended up moving it on to a friend of mine, and we played this copy. And another game, we played it in around 50 minutes, and it's a relatively involved game. I do like the dice mechanism in it, as you are picking one of these dice on this rondelle, and that's going to show how many spaces you move around the rondelle, and the spot you land on is the resources you get. However, if there's more dice there, then you get kind of multipliers of that. And then you're using those resources to build these different segments of the cathedral to get area majority bonuses. And I love this 2-scoring mechanism where you have 2 types of points. You've got the single points which let you crawl up the board, and you have these gold points as well, which can shoot you up the board, particularly earlier in the game. So I love that mechanism. I'd like to see it used more, actually. I think it's quite a cool touch. So yeah, pretty smooth to play, not terribly convoluted, but enough going on. And I think it's good. And I do like the fact that you do have storage capacity in this game. Actually, a little touch that I don't think enough games use, by not being able to shower yourself in resources and just hoard them. This one, I think you have a strict capacity of 10, and if you want to take more after that, then it's tough. You have to spend the ones you already have. But yeah, I thought it was okay. I've probably cooling it a bit since I initially reviewed it. I probably reviewed it around maybe a 7.5 to start with. I'd probably rate it around a 6 or a 6.5 now, but still, it's a decent game. And we also played a 3-player game of Furnace. So Furnace is a game that's grown on me, actually. I did like it initially. I did rate it, but every single time I played it since, I think I've liked it even more. And I think the last game I played yesterday was my favourite one yet. So this is a bidding game that has an awesome mechanism in it, as you are allocating your little discs here that look like this, and you have values becoming values 1 to 4. The 4 means that it's your best bid, of course, and you're probably going to acquire the card that comes with that. But if you end up bidding a lower number than your opponents do, then you get the bonus at the top here, which are going to be resources or little conversions you can do. And you're basically acquiring these cards to put them in this engine, which convert resources into other resources and then hopefully convert them into coins, which is your, victory currency or victory points. I ended up kind of going quite heavy in the first round to acquire a lot of the cards. I think I ended up the first round not getting any resources, but just the cards. And the second round and the third round and fourth round, actually, I ended up just pretty much basically acquiring a ton of the resources, and basically everything just fell into place in this game. I'm not quite sure why. I'm normally not terribly good at this game. I normally have wastage in terms of having too many things that convert resources and not enough to pay out. In this one, I kind of went with my gut a bit more and it just seemed to work, and I got a really high score. I'm not quite sure why, but I really enjoyed it. I think the game is so elegantly put together, and yeah, it's going from strength to strength really. It's climbed up quite a bit in my rankings after that play. And I'm really interested to see what the expansion content has to offer with Furnace, because normally of late I've not been so keen on the idea of expansions, because they tend to bog games down, take away from the the core of the game, I suppose. But I think if there's ever a game that has the framework to support more content, it could be Furnace. As long as they stay true to that bidding mechanism and the engine building, then there's a ton of potential here to really take this to the next level and probably get it into my top 100. So that is Furnace. Yeah, I really enjoyed that play. Last couple of games now, we played 2 games of Acropolis. So I played a 2-player game initially, which another game that went really well, actually. I ended up getting a good score. And the second game, we played a 3-player game. And we had a bit of a weird timing where at the end of the game's day, we had a bit more time than we thought we did. So we ended up putting all the tiles in, because normally with the setup in this game, you take a number of tiles out depending on the player count, but you can actually optionally, as a official variant, put all the tiles in there. And we did that, and I definitely think I'll be doing that from now on. It lets you have the potential to score more things, lets you place more tiles down, and it only adds around 5 minutes onto the game, which is more than proportionate considering this game is pretty crunchy and only takes around 25 minutes to play anyway. But this is a game I've been raving about of late. Definitely has potential to be in my top 10 games of the year. In fact, I'll be massively surprised if it isn't in my top 10 of 2022. And that's even considering I haven't played all the Essen Euros yet. So, yeah, high praise indeed. It doesn't do anything terribly new. It definitely has vibes of Miyabi, vibes of King Domino, but the way it pieces everything together is just brilliant. So much fun as you're laying these tiles out. All the different tiles have different colours, which will score in different ways. For example, all these orange ones want to be on the edge of your board because they'll score points that way. All the blues you want to be connecting together. Yellows you want in isolation, that kind of thing. But you're also connecting these stars, which will be the multipliers based on those. Additionally, you can place them vertically, which means, you can stack the tiles on top of each other, which means it will increase the multiplier of that. So, for example, the yellow here on level 2 will score 2 points rather than the standard 1, or 2 times based on the number of stars you have. So clean, this game. It really has taken me by storm. A big surprise of the year. Consistently hitting the table, never had a dull moment with it, and I just enjoy the puzzle. Very solid game, and I love it. I actually do love this game. That is Acropolis. And the final game that I've played for this episode is Robo Rally. So we played a 3-player game of Robo Rally, which I appreciate isn't probably the optimal way because the game board is pretty open at that player count. But this is a pretty wacky, chaotic programming style game as you have a robot. You're using that robot to traverse around the map, trying to reach these checkpoints. But if you ever land on certain spots like these conveyor belts, they'll drag you along. You've got these bumpers that can push you. You've got pits and stuff. So, all this kind of Robot Wars, your BattleBots style vibe to it. And I like the idea of it. I think it's maybe a little bit wacky for me, a little bit chaotic. You have to submit your control, I think, and just, embrace the chaos and see what happens rather than being able to play with any strategy or even any tactics, I suppose, because it is just, hope and see what happens. I think it's probably going to benefit more with more players. I've only actually played this at the lower player counts at all. So kind of looking forward to trying it with maybe 5 players to see how it works at that player count. But yeah, and I also think it's a little bit long. I don't know if there's a way to shorten it maybe to 2 checkpoints rather than 3. because it went on for about an hour, which is, yeah, I think it's a bit too long. So it's okay. It's okay. I think it's just a tasting, really. It's just not quite my cup of tea. That is Robo Rally, and I did actually win the game with actually not taking a single piece of damage, which was probably down to the fact that there wasn't enough players playing. But that is Robo Rally. So there we have it. Those are all the games I've been playing so far in October 2022, and I've actually had a good chance to play some new games as well. So yeah, make sure to keep an eye out for my game of the month next month, because I've had some very heavy hitters so far, and everything has been good. So that's the video really. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.